The ENEBRA project presentation. The birth of a human on the earth is a true miracle granted by nature. It really transcends our understanding. At the moment of birth, the vegetus of a newborn baby apprises the whole world that he has arrived on the earth and our earth is ready for his appearance. Nature prepared everything for him: the air to breathe, the mother's milk and warmth to eat and grow. The unbelievable beauty and variety of nature to develop and enjoy, and crystal clear water to drink. But at the time of his birth, nature did not prepare him for race or ethnic background, state or religious affiliation, social or political status. Nature did not assign him to be a slave or to rule the world. All this and many other things were figured out for him by people. Nature has given this little miracle so much positive energy that the exhausted mother, pressing him to her, feels such a powerful wind of kindness and love, in the light of which all her sufferings become dust. Nature has granted the newborn a free inherent uniqueness, which consists not only of fingerprints, appearance, the retina of the eyes, or the composition of DNA. It has gifted him an absolutely unique present to think, feel, and see the world around, thus adding another drop to the ideal balance. Nature's birth of this child creates a clear balance between the amount of resources on our planet and the number of people. The Earth's ecosystem awarded the baby with a 7/billionth part of its resources, which includes not only water and air, but iron ore, gold, oil and gas, granite and diamonds, forests, fields, and deserts. But unlike nature, the human system instantly took away all these gifts from him and handed them over to the state. The human system was certain that nature had made a big mistake and the child would not be able to utilize these gifts correctly, and that the use of these gifts by the child would lead to inevitable catastrophe. Then, as soon as happy parents register their child in government bodies, they declare him to be a citizen of their country. The state, which carefully compensates the gifts taken by nature, gives this happy little man, who has not yet made the first step on this land, a proportional part of the foreign debt. Today, every country in the world has a foreign debt, for which every citizen of this country is responsible. It is easy to calculate, dividing the foreign debt by the number of citizens of the country. We cannot believe in global conspiracy, world order, and the facts from the films, but I could not find any country with a negative balance sheet that has debtors. On March 1st, 2016, Forbes magazine published a list of the richest people on Earth. There are 1,810 people in the list, with $6.48 trillion of the total state. They did not loan anything to anyone. So to whom does humanity owe 70 trillion US dollars? Whoever this mysterious person or group of people is, they loaned this money by help of an organization that is called the International Monetary Fund, and the interest rate is calculated daily. I have calculated the average interest rate using poor information from the internet. It is approximately 3% per year. That is more than $2 trillion. But the interest rate's money is created by no one. If we gather all real money in the world, it will only be the body of the loan itself, and it is only a little part of what we owe. Consequently, we, our children and grandchildren, will never be able to pay back the loan, because it is physically impossible. This is actually why the information about the amount of printed money is classified state secret. If the amount of printed money is not increased permanently, then humanity would not be able to pay the bills, because they will return to their owners in the form of interest rates. But the more the amount of money there is, the lower its price and the bigger is the sum of the debt and calculated interest rate. It is the reason why inflation will enhance in geometric progression, and the value of your work will be permanently depreciated. The existing economic model is already in a deadlock. It is not able to stop this corrupted circle. Even the smallest speed slowing money creation causes economic crisis immediately. That is why the model has outlived itself. It is not necessary to have an economic education to understand this. It is enough to have just a simple calculator. Nature always shows us its genius. Nature brings balance among us. There is no registered case of a person with super abilities in all spheres at the same time throughout history. It is impossible to combine such abilities in one person as the excellent vision of Aristotle, who could realize that the Earth has a rounded form without flying into space, the fingers of Ludwig van Beethoven, who was absolutely deaf and who could create Moonlight Sonata, the voice of Luciano Pavarotti, the mind of Leonardo da Vinci, Vanga with her ability to predict the future, and the acting of Charlie Chaplin. In the documentary Home, Jan Arthus Bertrand visually showed that our planet is an indivisible, holistic, and alive organism. Humanity is a planet's integral organ, and since people have an ability to think, this organ can logically be called the planet's brain. Since people could only create technical devices that are still far from perfection, but nature created self-developing human brains that have the ability to understand the secrets of the universe, I decided to use natural systems as a basis for this project. To imagine natural systems as an example, I took its creation. Unique, self-regulating human body. Body and organs consist of cells. There is not a single identical cell in the human body, as well as there is not a single identical person on Earth. I've imagined the human brain with cells as a planet with people. Huge amounts of cells die every day, but huge amounts of cells are born too, so this process is similar to birth and death of all alive creatures on our planet. When a new cell is born, there is a special place prepared already. A new cell doesn't use other cells around for food or energy. Special environment conditions have already prepared everything for its life and development. Each cell is born with its own mission. Development of one cell has a huge impact on the whole organism in general. Despite all these obvious facts, humanity keeps living following the divide and rule principle, using centralized systems of control. In a centralized system, a very small group of people have an overman status. They decide who should live or who should die. They decide who will live in fear to lose everything they got or who will have nothing to lose at all. Project ENEBRA was created because any of the existing systems of control, such as democracy, monarchy, economic systems such as capitalism or socialism, any religious confessions such as Christianity, Taoism, Islam or Judaism, Hinduism, could not overcome crises, corruption, hunger, poverty, and could not stop bloody wars. After careful research on all contemporary projects, I couldn't find any logical and real answer to these questions. How is it possible to stop all destructive processes nowadays? How should we act? And what steps should we take to make fundamental changes in the existing situation and finally let people thrive? There are great projects like the Zeitgeist Movement, the Venus Project, Conceptual Party Unity, One Community, Thrive Project. I respect them. The authors made huge researches on current problems and ways of spreading this information among people. Unfortunately, methods of solving these problems are not accurate. There is no holistic approach, and these methods could fix just part of the existing problems. We realize the current situation. In my point of view, it is absolutely unwise to just passively wait till the total awakening or collapse while humanity passes the point of no return. The American Indians of the 19th century had a wise saying, "When the last tree has been cut down, the last river poisoned, the last bird caught, only then will we realize that one cannot eat money." The creator of the Venus Project, Jacques Fresco, introduced in his project an economic model based not on real money, but on real limited resources of our planet. This model received a name, resource-based economy. Project ENEBRA is only a technical instrument for a smooth and painless transition of humanity to a decentralized management system in a resource-based economy, which is able to give the opportunity for realization of self-potential to each person on Earth today, without any collapses and revolutions which bring only suffering, hunger, and destruction. ENEBRA is a free, decentralized network computer program with open source code based on blockchain technology, which allows people to facilitate and significantly reduce the cost of goods exchange, to get rid of debt obligations. It allows reliably protected copyrights, to motivate people on creation and implementation of new technical and methodical innovations, to implement mutual, more effective scientific and researching activity, to make mutual decisions, to participate in the process of lawmaking, to participate in different events, to create, implement, and develop new mass media systems, to take the information about amount, status, and spending of natural resources in real time. One of the strategic goals of Project ENEBRA is to give the opportunity for each person on the planet to achieve the top of Maslow's pyramid self-realization of the goals, skills, self-development. Most people on our planet are stuck on the lower levels of this pyramid. They live only by physical needs. They dream to eat enough and to feed their children, to buy TV and a satellite dish. Daily, they perform hated, slavish, inefficient work which helps them to survive. But not the one they dream about, not the work for the realization of which they came to this world. In my opinion, the impossibility of self-realization is at the core of such problems as depression, alcoholism, and drug addiction. After all, if each person can create something he was born for, his work would be 10 times more efficient, stresses would disappear, his self-evaluation would appear with understanding that this world and people's lives become better due to his work. Project ENEBRA absorbed already working, modified technical solutions united in a unique way, without any violation of intellectual property rights on them. I want you to pay your attention to the aspect of money's origin before we start introducing the first financial part of the project. The existing history of money's origin tells that people started independently to use items like shells, rings, and coins, and then later to make the exchange of goods easier. But this history is not completely logical, because the first level of the pyramid of Maslow tells only about physical needs. Therefore, a person would hardly change his goods, cloth, or weapons which are necessary for his own life on items without a big life value. That is why the value of gods was created at first. Then came the people that were able to talk with gods, and only after the creation of the authority, the opportunity appeared which allowed them to put an absolutely unvalued item, money, into the exchange of goods between usual people. To make it easier to understand, I visualized a piece about Cratchit the demon from the book called Parable by Vladimir Megra. From my point of view, this myth most clearly shows money's role as a mechanism of submission and control of people. Slowly, thousands of slaves were following each other. Each one of them had polished stone in his hands. 4 lines of people, more than 2 miles long each, were stretched out from the quarry to the point where city fortress construction began. Guards were moving right next to them. Every 10 slaves were controlled by one armed guard. Aside from the moving lines, right on top of the 100-foot man-made mountain was a person. It was one of the hierophants named Cratchit. Silently observing everything, he stayed there for 4 months already. Nobody had a right to distract him. No one even looked at him. He was in deep contemplation. He became an integral part of the landscape for slaves and guards below him. Nobody paid any attention to the motionlessly sitting or slowly walking figure on the top of that mountain. His main idea was to rebuild governmental systems and consolidate Hierophant's power on this planet for the next thousands of years. He wanted to turn all people into slaves of Hierophants, including existing governors. Once, Cratchit left his counterpart there and descended from the mountain. The Hierophant changed his clothes and took off the wig. He gave an order to the guardian to chain him and put him into the slaves' line right behind a young and strong slave. His name was Nard. Cratchit noticed that Nard's eyes were like gimlets compared to the other slaves, who had a wandering and detached glaze. Sometimes his face was thoughtful. Sometimes it was agitated. He should be thinking about something serious, probably about the plan, thought the Hierophant. But he observed longer to be sure. Cratchit was working, eating, sleeping right next to Nard for 2 days. Finally, on the third night, Cratchit turned around to the young slave and with bitterness and despair in his voice, addressing nobody, he whispered, "Is this how it will continue for the rest of life?" Suddenly, the young slave winced and turned around facing the Hierophant. His eyes were shining even in the low-light, dark atmosphere of the big barrack. "No, it won't be like this. I am finishing a plan. And you, old man, can participate too." "What kind of a plan?" sighed and asked Cratchit indifferently. Nard started to explain his plan confidently with passion. "One day you, old man, me and all slaves will be free. Look, there is one guard for every 10 slaves who bring stones. And there is one guard for every 15 slaves who cook and tailor clothes. If we attack them in a certain moment, we will win. I know, they have weapons and we are chained. But still it is 10 to 1. And we can use our chains as a weapon too. We will disarm them and take their weapons." "Oh, young man," said Cratchit blankly again, "your plan is not complete. Yes, we could disarm the guards who control us, but then the governor will bring new guards or even a whole army and kill the rebels. I've thought about it too. We should choose the time for the rebellion when the army will be far away from here. And this time will come. We can see that the army is going to campaign soon. They prepare provisions for 3 months. It means that the army will start fighting after 3 months en route somewhere. During that fight, the army will lose its strength and seize new slaves. We can see that the new barracks are being built now. We have to attack the guards at the very time that war begins. It will take up to 1 month for messengers to deliver the message of immediate return. It will take at least 3 months for a weakened army to come back. We will still have around 4 months to prepare for fighting. Still, we will have to fight against a bigger amount of warriors. But conquered slaves will join us after they realize what's happened. I have predetermined everything correctly." "Oh, young boy, you have a great plan to disarm the guards and win the army," answered the old man, freshly this time. "But what are the slaves going to do after? And what will happen to all the rulers, guards, and soldiers? I didn't think much about this. The only thought that comes to my mind is to give freedom to all the people who used to be slaves before. And then," he was kind of thinking loudly, "all the people who are not slaves now will become slaves." Not so confidently answered Nard. "What about hierophants? Tell me, young man, after your victory, would hierophants be slaves or free people?" "Hierophants? I didn't think about them. But for now, I'm assuming to keep them free. Rulers and slaves, listen to them. It is hard to understand them sometimes, but I think that they are harmless. Let them talk about gods. We know better how to live our lives." "Better is always good," said the old man, pretending to be very sleepy. But he didn't sleep through the whole night. He was thinking. Of course, it is easy to notify guards about this conspiracy. They will take this slave. He is the main inspirer for everybody else for sure. But it won't solve a problem. Slaves will always have the desire for freedom. New rulers will come again. Slaves will create new plans again. If so, the main threat to government will be inside forever. Cratchit had an aim: to develop a plan for enslaving the world. He realized that it is not possible to reach this goal using only physical violence. Psychological impact for every person, for every nation is needed. It is necessary to transform human thought. to ingrain that slavery is the highest good ever. It is necessary to launch self-developing systems that will disorientate entire nations in conception, space, and time. But the most important is to keep an adequate perception of reality. These thoughts inside his head were moving faster and faster. He didn't feel the weight of his chains. And then suddenly, as a shiny flashlight, this brilliant idea appeared in his head. With no details and inexplicable yet, but scorching already because of its scale. Cratchit felt himself the autocratic lord of the world. He was chained, lying on bunks, admiring himself. Tomorrow, when all slaves start their job, I will give the conventional sign, and guards will take me out from the slave line and unchain me. I will refine my program. I will pronounce a couple of words and the world will change. Unbelievable. Only a couple of words and the whole world will obey me, obey my thought. God gave us incredible power, power of thought. It can't be compared with anything else in the universe. It creates words and changes history's flow. It's an incredibly good situation. Slaves have a plan for an uprising. This plan makes sense and can bring positive interim results. But with only a couple of phrases, I will force all existing slaves, all their future children, all rulers of the world to become slaves for the coming thousands of years. Next morning, after a special sign, the security chief removed his shackles. On the very next day, he invited 5 hierophants and Pharaoh to the top of the mountain. Cratchit started his speech. What you are going to hear now should not be recorded or recounted. There are no walls around us, so no one except you will hear it. I have invented a way of making all existing people on earth into slaves of our Pharaoh. It is impossible to make it without countless armies and exhausting wars. But I am going to make it happen with a couple of sentences. And after only 2 days, you will see how the world is changing. Look, there are long lines of chained slaves below us. They are controlled by a big amount of soldiers. More slaves are better for government. We've always thought like that. But with a bigger amount of slaves, there is a higher risk of riot. We have to strengthen security all the time. We have to feed slaves well, otherwise they can't undertake hard physical work. But they are still prone to riot. Look how slowly they move and how lazy guards lash even strong and healthy slaves. But they will move faster. And no guards will be needed. Guards will become slaves too. We can accomplish it in this way. Tonight, before sunset, criers will spread the decree of Pharaoh among the slaves that, with the dawn of the new day, all slaves will be free. For each stone delivered to the city, a free person will receive 1 coin. A coin is a small rounded piece of metal with Pharaoh's image. It is real if Pharaoh has touched it. For the production or distribution of forged coins, a free person will be deprived of his life. It will be possible to exchange coins for food, clothes, housing, a palace in town, or even a town itself. From this moment, you are all free people. When hierophants realized everything that he'd said, one of them, the oldest one, said, "You are a demon, Cratchit. Your demonic idea will spoil countless nations through the centuries." If I am a demon, let people call my idea democracy. Before the sunset decree was announced, the news struck slaves in astonishment. Most of them didn't sleep that night. The following morning, hierophants and Pharaoh were standing on the top of the mountain. The scene below them was breathtaking. Thousands of people, former slaves, were racing each other carrying the same stones as yesterday, sweating. Some of them had 2 stones at once. Those who had 1 stone were running in whirling dust. Some guards were carrying stones too. Slaves found themselves to be free people. Since they didn't have any chains, they wanted to get as much as possible of the cherished coins to build their happy life. Cratchit spent a couple months longer on the top of the mountain observing the situation below him. Changes were overwhelming. Groups of slaves built trolleys. Sweating people were pushing trolleys full of stones to the city. They will create many more inventions, thought Cratchit with satisfaction. Here you go, servants who bring food and water. Some of the slaves didn't want to spend time to reach barracks for their meal. So they were eating right on their way, paying coins to food deliverers. It is incredible. Some of them became healers. They can heal even on the move. All these for coins too. They chose crossing guards. Very soon they will choose bosses and judges. Let them choose. They think that they are free, but the essence never changed. They still carry stones. So they run through centuries in dust, sweating, carrying heavy stones. And today, descendants continue this senseless race. In its essence, the value of fiat money, from the Latin fiat, decree, order, let it be so, was established by a guarantor. This money was issued on behalf of the guarantor, and it is all based on the trust for this guarantor. But trust is very hard to count. The value of money was started to ensure by the very unclear concept of state when democracy came. On bills and coins was begun to portray the dead political leaders due to the frequent change of unscrupulous rulers. Ostensibly, it was done to guarantee the value of money by history of the state itself that is even harder to calculate. We should not bind the value of fiat money with gold reserves of the country until 1971 as well, because only very limited amounts of people could control the reserves of this metal. These people were directly subordinate to the head of state. That is why fiat money costs as much as you believe they should cost. Abolition of the gold standard, increase in the number of financial crises and uncontrolled money issue destroyed people's trust to state currencies. This fact became a basis for appearance of cryptocurrencies. With cryptocurrencies, it is not possible to impact on the clear algorithmic emission, but their cost is equated to the cost of fiat state money. Then it is equal to a strange number, which is called trust. That is the reason why a new unit of account is proposed in the project ENEBRA. It is a resource equivalent ENEBRA, which is not a fiat or a cryptocurrency and has its own mathematical calculation. Its cost does not base on trust, but is mathematically calculated on counting of real resources on our planet. The term resource includes not only mineral resources of the planet, such as oil, gas, or iron. It includes such resources like drinking water, fish in rivers, seas and oceans, different kinds of trees, and any other type of vegetation, all kinds of animals on Earth, the condition of the ozone layer and ice cover over the poles of our planet. The formula for calculating the resource equivalent was made by mathematician Oksana Zhumik. I did only a technical task for its creation. I will try to explain it as simply as possible. The price of every resource equivalent is a composite sum. Each part of it is calculated separately every 10 minutes. Each part of it is a separate resource of our planet, As more components we have, as more accurate price of resource equivalent. Is each component separately? Shows that present component is calculated in moment of time, where n is an ordinal ENEBRA emission number. Initial formula calculates the coefficient, shares of resources, which are available for use for members of the project. This process is important to reduce rights infringement of people who do not participate in this project. Further, we calculate an amount of given resource at a given time. To calculate the amount of given resource at a given time, we use general amount of resource that was calculated during the past generation. We subtract the amount of resources that were used in a period between previous and current generation. We know that share of each resource belongs to each person by birthright. It is calculated during each generation and belongs to each person during their lifetime. To find this value, we have to divide average duration of human life in minutes. Based on United Nations statistics, average life duration is about 67 years, by the amount of time between ENEBRA generations. For now, it is about 10 minutes. As a result, we get an average amount of generations during human lifetime. In that case, the upper numerator value of the second fraction of formula that is multiplied by coefficient of participants' share helps us to calculate the overall share of particular resource in a given generation of resource equivalents for every participant of the project. After each generation, the amount of new created resource equivalents equals the amount of project participants. In this case, we have to add new generated ENEBRA to early generated ENEBRA. It is a difference between participants in present time and amount of resource equivalents of dead participants after human death resource equivalents return in system. I will talk about it later. It is a number of generation in present moment of time. Denominator, lower part of second fraction of formula, helps us to get average amount of created resource equivalents per one generation. In this case, every 10 minutes, each participant of the project will get resource equivalents and know its exact price. Moreover, the person receives a share of responsibility together with resource equivalents. The opportunity to create a consumption and recovery vector for each resource apart and a total resource equivalent as a whole appears by using precise mathematical calculations and a sequence of values for each moment of time, after the bringing to the single calculation system. The cost of the resource equivalent will decrease because resources consumption is much higher than their recreation. How to decrease and then to stop inflation of the resource equivalent will be explained in detail below. For better understanding, I will show opportunities of the formula on such an irreplaceable resource as oil. The calculation was done by using the data of US Central Intelligence Agency, which was openly published in Wikipedia because they maximally embrace all countries. I could not get data from the countries themselves because in many countries, this information is a state secret and is hidden from citizens of these countries. In accordance with the CIA data, there are 1.7 trillion barrels or 239.8 billion tons of oil reserves on the planet. Oil production per day will be on average 12.6 million barrels, taking into account the constant growth. The time to reserves exhaustion is 52 years. Proceeding from the given data, oil will end by 2065. If we count on the basis of all the inhabitants of the planet, The cost of the oil component of one resource equivalent in 2013 was only 10.51 millilitres of oil. Today, this equivalent is much lower. But planet Earth will keep conditions for existence almost 2.5 billion years longer. Understanding the fact that a person can spend no more than 1.5 litre of crude oil, if he wants to use oil till the end of his days, not even talking about his children, allows him to watch in completely another way on useless oil spending by buying and throwing out disposable lighters, although he can use without any harm for himself the reusable ones. Disposable tableware, plastic bags, disposable shaving machines, plastic bottles, kids' toys, which a child breaks and throws out during the way home sometimes. It allows us to look at the necessity of using electric automobiles in completely another way. Unfortunately, market economy forces a human to think from a position of money. It is possible to create money unlimitedly by adding zeros in a computer. But unlike money, natural resources are limited. It is not possible to print resources, and it is probably already impossible to refill many of them. In essence, the resource equivalent ENEBRA is not just a unit of exchange which it is possible to use to buy goods and services, to invest or give to charity. It is some kind of a litmus paper that displays the amount and tempos of resource spending, recreation or reduction of flora and fauna. It reacts immediately on any changes in the ecosystem of planet Earth and clearly indicates the source of the problem. Inflation and deflation of ENEBRA will help any person on Earth to feel his own responsibility for our planet before other people and future generations. Maybe people will stop chopping such beautiful trees like Christmas trees or spruce after Christmas or New Year inflations on such resources. Maybe they will plant a tree which they never did before and decorate it each following holiday without damaging nature. After all, scientists say it is still 2.5 billion years to the end of the life cycle of our planet. ENEBRA cannot be loaned, gifted, or passed by inheritance. This nuance might cause conflicting feelings and misunderstandings, but they will disappear when you will watch the presentation till the end. I only say now that it is possible to bequeath any property you have. The project is based on an idea that natural resources of Earth cannot be someone's property. They belong to all living people at this moment, and the resource equivalent is exactly the same as Earth's natural resources. Furthermore, any person is guaranteed to receive his share of resource equivalents during the life from the moment of birth to the moment of death. The born child will live not at the expense of his parents. Like in a human body, new cells do not live at the expense of neighbor cells. He will live at the expense of resources which were granted to him by our planet on the right of his birth. The ENEBRA system includes a similar mechanism of social assistance to restore natural justice. It works today in many countries of the world. A distinctive feature of the project mechanism is every 10 minutes generating algorithmically calculated amounts of resource equivalents ENEBRA equal to the number of project participants, and using the golden ratio proposed by the financier Eduard Moiseev, divides them into three main parts: human, support of the system's working capacity, and financing of the world's projects. For easier understanding of ENEBRA emission, I will use this next example. In this case, the ENEBRA network consists of 25 people. Therefore, every 10 minutes, the system will create 25 ENEBRA, and 50%, 12.5 of ENEBRA, will fall into a human share. Share human is a part of resource that divided evenly and falls into private digital wallet of each participant, age doesn't matter, as an equal part. The next part of created ENEBRA falls into share of maintaining system. 24 hours working servers are necessary for stable operation of decentralized system. The server's functions are to check transactions and blockchain storage. The stability and system protection is proportional to the amount of servers. Therefore, a share will be evenly divided between registered participants who already have or will buy special servers and connect it to the ENEBRA system. This share will be divided between participants and will be added to share human. Each participant can have only one registered server. Financing of World Project. Compared to the two previous, this share is different. It won't be divided between participants, and it has a cumulative character. This share is needed for project financing. Such projects as life improvement and welfare of each ENEBRA participant. We will discuss the details below. Emission system of ENEBRA depends on two values. First is the time. We don't get this parameter from only one source. Accuracy of this parameter is calculated with algorithms during all servers synchronizing. Due to this reason, it is impossible to change it. The second value is the amount of participants. This parameter always changes due to birth and death of people. Forgery doesn't make any sense. You will see it in further descriptions of system details and operation. After the death of a person, all his equivalents will return back to the system and proportionately reduce the number of new generated ENEBRA. Thus, due to reducing the output of the ENEBRA itself, it is possible in the future that additional generation of resource equivalents will be algorithmically stopped. The ENEBRA feature resolves the next Bitcoin disadvantage. Algorithmically set amounts of cryptocurrency emission is not connected to the amount of participants. Emission of resource equivalents is based on time and amount of participants. This fact makes mining and pools absolutely useless. That's how ENEBRA resolves one more disadvantage. Cryptocurrency mining requires a big amount of calculating resources. In fact, it uselessly spends a lot of electricity. This situation forces participants to generate pools, and pools undermine confidence of other participants. The blockchain of the ENEBRA system keeps the time of its creation in every block. Moreover, it keeps the amount of participants and the amount of servers with public digital keys. The blockchain information is stored on every computer of the system at the same time. This fact makes it impossible to change any information, including own balance. Changed hash sum value will be automatically denied by the system. I have already explained this moment in the technological part of the presentation. Further, I want to talk about the specifics of the digital wallet used in the ENEBRA system. But before that, I would like to touch such a topic as anonymity in the modern world. During a lifetime, information about any person is preserved in public authorities at receiving of any document like a birth certificate, a passport, a driving license. Information about you and your illnesses is stored in separate places in all medical institutions which you visit. Information about your income and savings is kept in banks, in the personnel departments, and at the cashiers of your company. You leave your data in notary offices, embassies when obtaining a visa, or your biometric data in US Embassy or any European country. We use email on centralized servers. We communicate in the centralized social networks where, even if we hide our real name, we openly show all our friends or colleagues who know almost everything about us. Now, it is possible to buy any database in the internet. This list can be continued for a very long time. As a result, a fair and legitimate question arises: from whom and why are we so ineffectively hiding? And why are we spending the most expensive thing a person has, the lifetime, to the constant filling of the same personal data in a huge bureaucratic machine? So let's get back to the specifics of the digital wallet. In the story about the cryptographic purse used in cryptocurrencies, I have already explained the essence of two interrelated digital keys, such as public, which is used as an address, and private, which is used as a digital signature. In the cryptocurrency system, each participant can create an unlimited number of wallets. Unlike cryptographic, in the ENEBRA system, each participant can create only one digital wallet because his public key is his personal data such as name, surname, date, and place of birth, as well as the name, place, and date of birth of the father and mother. This data will be passed through the hash function, and its digest will be a public key, which can be transformed for convenience into a QR code. At registering, the system will once check the entire existing database for a match, because the digest must be unique. In its essence, the digest is a number in a decentralized database. The complexity of human biometric data, geometry of face and blood vessels, fingerprints, iris, retina, and so on, is a private key. Thus, sending resource equivalents, a person writes in a public key of a recipient and a sender and sends his biometric sample. Each server of the network will check the balance of the wallet and make verification. If the sample corresponds to the biometrical data of the sender's key, the transaction is confirmed and will be entered into the newly created block. If someone uses someone else's QR code, the biometric samples will not be matched and the transaction will be denied. At such control systems, a person can be calm about probable loss of the QR code because he can always restore it by his original data about himself and his parents. The lost QR code is useless for all other network members. In the case of amnesia, this key can be easily restored by using the identification procedure, about which I've already talked. The only minus of the procedure is the time duration, because servers will have to compare the obtained biometric sample with all available ones in the database. Since children up to a certain age do not have stable biometric parameters, the right to sign payments on their behalf will be given to their parents or caregivers, but it will be limited by the needs of a child. For example, it will not be possible to purchase wine and vodka products or cigarettes by using these resources. It will be possible to spend them on baby food, diapers, payment for medical treatment, education, usage of children's entertainment centers, and so on. I will tell later about how it is possible technically. The use of biometrics in the real world has a serious problem, which consists in using biometric data of a person under the threat of life. But in the project ENEBRA, all users are identified and any transaction can be done only between real people, the network's users. Companies, offshore zones or banks, everything that does not have human biometric characteristics do not exist in the network ENEBRA. That is the reason why usage of violence is senseless, because all transactions are permanently saved in blocks. The blocks are lined up in a blockchain, and copies of the blockchain are saved on all devices of the system's users. So any member can check who, to whom, and when has transferred resource equivalents. This factor makes most crimes useless and allows for a significantly decreased crime rate in the whole world. Unlike existing decentralized systems, the system ENEBRA saves any entered data in a specific format in a block, not only the data about a transfer of resource equivalent. It makes possible to completely get out of the bureaucracy and to add only acquired personal data during the life process to the data, which were already entered into the systems at registration. Inside the system, each person makes a decision by himself. He decides which data to open for public usage and which to keep in an encrypted state. A similar system of preservation of personal data has already been developed and successfully applied in Lithuania for 10 years. The only difference is that it is decentralized. Anticipating the question of professionals about the size of one block, I would like to tell that a blockchain itself keeps only hash sums of recorded data, and the data are decentralized, stored on the servers of system users. The purpose of this video presentation is to maximally convey the essence of the project to non-IT related people. For this reason, I omit and simplify a lot of technical aspects. So, in the first approximation, the settlement system of Project ENEBRA is a fundamentally modified Bitcoin system, where the public key is opened personal data of a person. This solves such a disadvantage of the Bitcoin system like imaginary full anonymity supports the development of shady and criminal transactions from the sale of drugs, weapons, contract killings, etc. The private key is personal biometric characteristics that a person has from his birth to the death. Thus, in this way, it solves one more significant disadvantage of Bitcoin, like the possibility of theft or loss of Bitcoin as own funds and as a part of resource of the entire Bitcoin economy, and also the impossibility to determine the amount of lost funds. The symbiosis of blocking and biometric technology allows us to accomplish the second goal of the project. It allows us to remove the dependence of people from the existing financial system. It makes impossible the processes of fiat inflation, unaccounted use of money, and removes the possibility of any financial crises. The system really completely excludes the possibility of a physical loss of the resource equivalents because people are not able to lose all their biometric data at the same time. The same way is solved the goal of the project about deleting of the bureaucratic structure, which takes a lot of time and money from almost every inhabitant of the earth. Despite the apparent complexity, the use of the computational system of ENEBRA is not more difficult than usage of a mobile phone, because all processes are completely automatized. When using the ENEBRA calculation system, a system of taxation becomes completely meaningless, because each person receives his share of resource equivalents, despite his age and efficiency, which is sufficient for satisfying physical needs, and the share, financing of world projects, takes on itself the creation of large-scale mutual projects. I will talk about it later. In the above-mentioned film Thrive, methods of containment of technical and scientific progress, suppression of scientific and technical discoveries that make obstacles for enrichment of dominant clans and corporations were uncovered very well by Foster Gemble. In addition, it can be said that nowadays in the world, such a direction as a startup is intensively developed. Many of young and creative developers share their technical projects on open sites in the internet. The most interesting, supported by the internet community and corporations projects, become property of large corporations in the end. They get the rights for the project by investing more than 50% of the financial resources, which were gathered by all other network members, or just by stealing the idea of a project and changing it a little bit. After the creation of an own project, the older generation of engineers developers try to patent their inventions and to find investors for its implementation. But at the end, they lose it or get caught by tenacious paws of patent trolls, or receive the minimum fee for their long-term work in a form of fiat money, which is immediately eaten by inflation. and their work brings enrichment only for the corporations. In the ENEBRA project, each member of the network is interested to absolutely openly and safely publish his invention, scientific development, methods of teaching or treatment, etc., since all these data will be recorded in a new created block. The block will be added to blockchain that does not allow changing of blocks' places. Thereby, copyright for this creation is set forever by the connection with biometric data of the author. Once the project or technology is added to blockchain, it becomes available to all members of the network ENEBRA. If the status of the project is completed, it is immediately placed in the system for implementation to end users. If the status of the project is open rework, each person can take part in its rework, and if his refinements improve any aspect of this project and are accepted by the network participants, this person automatically becomes a co-author of the project. I've already explained the smart contract concept in the technological part of the presentation. The concept applied by Vitalik Buterin in the Ethereum project. One more difference of block in ENEBRA project, it contains smart project inside. Depending on the field of innovation and its level of readiness, the smart project will have different details and conditions. Going forward, I would like to demonstrate the whole process of innovation creation from idea level to the moment of actual sample use. You can find the movie Thrive at enebra.org, about project, video, informative part. Notable part of this movie is about innovations in free energy field. In this movie, it is demonstrated real functioning samples created in laboratories all over the world. Let's imagine a process of innovation creation inside the ENEBRA system. Let's say that one participant has an idea to create a free energy generator. The participant describes an idea using a digital document with a plan that was confirmed by all participants of the system. We will discuss it later. In the description, the author sets up a time frame for idea improvement and enters his own public key. The description of the idea is going through a hash function. Received hash sum is a good protection against data changes, and also it can be as an inventory project number itself in system database. This number stays in current block and author signs project with private digital key. As soon as author's copyright data saved in blockchain forever, project becomes available for all participants. Somewhere on the other side of the world, another participant has an idea how to improve the efficiency of this innovation with a slight project refinement. The participant uploads the refinement information with its detailed justification. All this data automatically goes to new following block, and this person becomes co-author of the current innovation. Every other participant who knows how to make this innovation more safe, more reliable, or how to decrease its price, simply makes changes inside this project and automatically becomes co-author. The list of improvements can be endless. People with all kinds of abilities can participate in the project. Someone can provide sound-absorbing coverage. Someone can provide design for this device and turn it into a unique masterpiece. After the refinement timeframe is over, there is an open voting for everyone in the system. Voting results shows if there is a necessity of the current project. If more than half of voters support it, the project gets accepted idea status, and author with co-authors start working on the next phase, confirmation of idea and calculation of sample production. They create a document with detailed descriptions of sample that is needed for idea confirmation, amount of materials needed, place for production, labs, transport, list of experts and qualified requirements for them, testing plan, list of evaluation criteria and ways to measure them, critical measure values that should be achieved during tests. After the document is uploaded, there is an automatic tender announcement in the system. Every participant can equally offer available resources and independently calculate its value or calculate the desirable percentage of future project profit. After the tender is done, the system automatically finds out the most advantageous offers and informs every participant about it. There is voting based on these results. If network participants decide that descriptions of technological device as well as resources for its production are reasonable, the project receives confirmed status. After that, tender winners transfer all necessary resources to sample developers. After transfer and control of resources from accumulating share financing of world projects, resource equivalents are going to end up on private accounts of project participants. And free energy project developers get all necessary resources for sample creation. Please pay attention that sample developers don't get an access to resource equivalents. Money is not needed during the production process. It is impossible to create anything out of it. Such things as premises, materials, machinery, and people are needed for production. Painted paper or sets of digits in computer are useless in this process. It is also impossible to sell any goods because of clarity of every transaction inside the ENEBRA system. This aspect makes it impossible to overuse resources of other participants for private purposes, which is very common in the current system. After the sample is created and all its characteristics and efficiency are demonstrated, the sample receives confirmed status. If any participant thinks that this device can improve quality of life, it is easy to place a pre-order by signing a smart contract. We discussed it before. That's how the huge natural resources eating mechanism called overproduction can be stopped. Based on data about real amount of consumers, project participants can develop a plan of serial production with all necessary amount of resources for full cycle of production. After that, there is one more tender appears. It is absolutely the same as the previous one. Right after this tender, the final prime cost of complete finished device is calculated. All this data is used for final voting. If a bigger amount of participants decide that amount of spent resources is reasonable, the project receives status confirmed right at its launch. After that, the ENEBRA system automatically calculates the share amount for each participant of each created project. There is an author's fixed share that was confirmed by the system. Leftover share is distributed among all co-authors and all other participants of the project using internal system application with public digital key or using public signed contract between project participants. All participants who placed pre-orders send resource equivalents to previously created smart contracts. Because these contracts are part of Smart Project, the amount of resource equivalents is equal to the prime cost of the device. It is easy to calculate this amount because all transactions in the system are transparent. These funds, as well as in the previously described scheme, are not available to the participants in the free energy project. The winners of the tender for transferring the necessary resources for the production work will receive the funds as payment. The author of the invention has the initial right to organize production, but he/she can delegate this right to any member of the network. After the start of the production, serial products are distributed among all the participants of the network who made a payment. Until the generator was received, the network participant had to spend part of his/her resource equivalents received from the man share to pay for electricity received from the energy company. Once the person receives and connects the free energy generator, from now on, he/she does not need to pay the energy company. Being connected, the person signs a smart contract for the entire period of use of the generator. After receiving the device, the above-described man share begins automatically to redistribute 50% of the resource equivalents from 100% of the released ones using this generator to the free energy project contract, and 50% will be left to the generator owner. The resource equivalents paid to the contract are immediately shared among all participants of the free energy project, according to the percentage of each participant, and the equivalents move to their personal wallets. Thus, the creator and manufacturers will be maximally motivated to create things with the highest possible quality and duration of operation. The longer the device that they released operates, the longer they can receive redistributed resource equivalents, which in turn will put an end to the planned obsolescence. And that is an integral part of the current market economy. In addition, this project will considerably improve the environment, which in its turn will have a beneficial effect on the health of each of us. Smart Project will be supported by the system and continue to work as long as there is at least one valid smart contract. There is another possibility to implement Own Project, but this option in most cases refers to large-scale world projects. Examples of such projects are Skyway, Ultra PT, and Ultra Hyperloop technologies, transport and infrastructure technologies, as well as the Venus project, where the construction of a whole city with the new generation infrastructure is proposed. Those kinds of projects require significant resource costs. In this case, after the project is completely finalized, it is suggested, together with other global projects, for the voting by the whole ENEBRA network, and if by the majority of votes it is accepted, then the resource equivalents for holding the tender and obtaining the necessary resources are allocated from the financing of the world project's share. Further development of the project does not differ from the described procedure of the first option, with the only difference that the voting will be held once a week. This time, it is necessary for all network members to be able to get acquainted with all the submitted projects and understand which one is for them first. The efficiency of the proposed system is several times higher than the existing one. Since the inventor initially adds his invention into the blockchain, which does not let to change or exchange the place of blocks, and it is maintained by all network members. It establishes its copyright forever, that is inextricably linked to his biometric data, which is not possible to be counterfeited or lose. Thus, the goal of the project about protection of intellectual property is achieved 100%. Furthermore, it is not necessary for the author to pay for this procedure. In the existing system, the author of the invention is forced to collect a huge number of documents, to go through a mass of instances, to bear financial costs, which he is not always able to pay for. But the most important is he loses a lot of precious time of his life for bureaucracy in the form of obtaining a patent or for investment searching, but not for improving or creation of new inventions, which could improve life quality of each person on our planet. Furthermore, the received patent is recognized only by the state that gave it. In today's world, there is no such patent, which would guarantee the protection of copyright in all existing countries. The tempos of technological progress in our time are so big that the emerging technology becomes obsolete in a year. But to obtain a patent in Britain, the inventor must spend about 2 years in average. For this reason, the existing copyright protection system is a powerful brake on the path of technological progress of mankind. The second positive aspect is that the invention immediately becomes fully accessible to all network members, which makes it completely meaningless to persecute the author of the invention. Thus, the following goal of the ENEBRA project is achieved. The goal is to make it completely useless to persecute scientists and scientific projects that interfere with monopolization by large corporations and leading clans. The possibility of mutual reworking allows to achieve one more important goal of the project: to stop destructive competition that unlimitedly consumes natural and human resources of our planet. Imagine the tempos and quality of technical progress if scientists and engineers who work in scattered laboratories around the world trying to create the same product in our competitive systems will sit at the same table, open their achievements, and together start to create the stuff that they were hiding from each other in the hope of profitably selling it in the future. After all, there are hundreds of thousands of such scientists. Try to imagine what all these people could do without such deterrent factors like lack of finance, cultural and human ignorance, in which some people still manage to self-realize and accomplish their mission, the reason why they came in this world. And now imagine that such a progress is possible in all directions of mankind's development. I want to tell you that it is hard to imagine, even for me, the author of the project ENEBRA, all these volumes, opportunities, and rates of development. The voting system, in conjunction with the real cost of the resource equivalent, allows people to make informed joint decisions based on a clear understanding of the number of limited resources of the planet and rationality of their costs for the voting project. And the system of remuneration of authors, co-authors, and executors of projects allows to solve an unsolvable problem of market economy and one of the goals of the project: forever to stop overproduction and to make unnecessary planned obsolescence that uselessly spends natural resources and pollutes our planet. As creators and producers, we'll be maximally motivated to create things with the highest possible quality and duration of work, because the longer a device works that is created by them, the longer they can receive redistributed resource equivalents. The goal of each new project is to improve the life quality of the participants of the system. In the ENEBRA system, each person who could create a good for another person, a group of people, or for all participants of the system, improves his own life quality on account of 50% goods created by him directly proportional to the number of people who get benefits from his creation and increase their life quality at the same time. Unlike the existing reality, each project participant is interested in increasing the amount of rich people in the system, because his own life quality will increase as well. Together with the resource equivalent, this system will allow to solve the very first goal of the project. At the expense of the existing intellectual and natural resources of the planet, to ensure the maximum possible subsistence level for each person from his birth to the moment of death. In connection with this fact, people will no longer be needed in imagined workplaces because all processes will be maximally automated to maximally unload the person from routine and ineffective work, to give him an opportunity to develop as much as possible and to self-actualize, which means to do something for what he came into this world to do, to develop his genius for the benefit of our entire planet. In the technical and historical aspect, the project ENEBRA, block after block, will create the most complete encyclopedia of knowledge and technology of all mankind, and all of us will be an owner of its copy. According to the presented scheme, plant growing and food production technologies will be opened and further developed. The technologies will allow us to escape from genome modification and using of pesticides and to reduce the level of disease among people and the pollution of the environment by that. Technologies for obtaining water from condensate with a daily temperature change, or the project by Samuel Krugliak that allows to receive not only clean energy but clean water as well. These projects solve the problem of a lack of drinking water, even in those areas of the earth where there is no other sources. Technologies of growing organs from stem cells, which will allow to save thousands of lives who wait in a queue for a transplant, and to receive grown steak for fans of meat products without killing any animals. Researching space programs that allow in real time to receive data about the universe, to assess the state of the Earth's surface and glaciers, to control deforestation and reforestation, fish catching, etc. Water. Engineer Arkady Levin surpassed his colleagues. Its appliance gets water from the air. Levin presented his thesis on the problems of thermodynamics at a viva voce in the Soviet Union. And already having moved to Israel, he designed this kind of appliance. In fact, this is an ordinary pipe buried deep in the ground. Next is the matter of the laws of physics. Levin's appliance operates using only air. The turbine, which is moved by the wind, pumps warm air into the pipe. Then the air moves downwards. The temperature under the ground level is lower than on the ground surface. As a result, the air becomes cool very quickly, moisture appears, and runs down into the reservoir. We were asked the following question: do you get water from the soil? No, we get it from the air. We get the water due to the process of condensation and temperature difference. It can be used anywhere. It is possible to drill a well in Africa, in India, or in China. For countries with a hot climate, for example in Africa, where there is not enough water, this is an ideal way out. Moreover, using a pilot appliance, the scientists discovered a curious effect. The higher the temperature of the surrounding air, the more water is produced.
In western India, 30% of wells have been abandoned. The underground aquifers are drying out. Vast reservoirs will catch the monsoon rains to replenish the aquifers. In dry season, women from local villages dig them with their bare hands.
I have never drunk drinking water. I do not even know how it tastes. Just imagine, every day you should walk for hours to get water. I have already seen so many times emaciated women and even children carrying on their heads 30-litre buckets of water. 800 million people do not have drinking water. Every day, contaminated water kills more than 4,000 children. Power engineering. A 10th grade student from Kirovorad region, Samuil Kruliak, won a bronze medal at the Olympics of Geniuses in the US. 2,000 young inventors from around the world took part in the competition. The Ukrainian student suggested to get electricity from the air, or rather from the atmosphere, by means of an artificial ionized cloud due to a strong electric field. This electricity will be environmentally friendly and cheap. The power station produces electricity from the atmosphere, from the air. The power station itself consists of a tower 50 meters high, and around it there are electrodes at the height of 150 meters. Each drop has its own charge. The sun constantly ionizes the environment. Steam begins to attract to the tower. Since the drops are positively charged, an electric voltage is excited. This idea came to me in the 8th grade. I really saw it in my dream. I could draw it, but I did not understand what it was like. On average, such power station is designed for 315 megawatts. For our city of Alexandria, there is only one power station is required. For the city of Kiev, 2, 3, or 4 such power stations may be required. No fuel is needed for its operation. People's Republic of China. In China, for example, 2 new coal-fired power stations are opened every week. China is in the first place in the world for the release of gases that deplete the ozone layer. Food.
High-tech farming, aquaponic and hydroponic systems. Who here is familiar with aquaponics or hydroponics? What CFS is doing, my company, is I'm building self-sustaining, fully automated aquaponic farm buildings that are about 464 square meters in size, solar and wind powered with a battery bank backup system. I can feed 1,600 people 10 different fruits and vegetables each in that one building. And it's completely self-sustaining. Collects its own water, maintains its own energy balance. It does not need an infusion of extra nutrients because it's aquaponic, which means it has a small little fish farm built in. And what that means is that the fish make the water dirty through all their waste. Well, guess what? The plants actually like that. So you take the dirty water, you filter it over, you send it over to the plants, they suck out all the nutrients. That cleans the water. Then you run that water back to the fish tank, closed loop, symbiotic system. And the plants, or the fish, the food that they eat is another plant that grows in the water. So that is its own closed loop system. So you don't have to add fish food. You don't really need to mess with it. In fact, when the building is all put together, you just turn it on and walk away and it starts cranking out food. Leafy greens, baby tomatoes, baby cucumbers. I affectionately call it a salad factory. It's really what it is. But it's a start. I mean, it will put food in the bellies of people who are literally starving to death by the thousands every single day.
When we run out of food, we are going to collect rice grains from rat burrows. If we find them, then we will store them in the basket. We return home when we have a full bag. The next morning we cook rice and then go and collect more. God is good. He looks at us and gives us everything. When God sees me walking and looking for something everywhere, I always find some amount of rice. I rummage through rat holes and go home. Meat.
Meat is muscle from an animal. By our technology, we actually are producing meat. It's just not in a cow. I'm a physician and I do mostly cardiovascular research, making tissues, especially blood vessels, for bypass grafting. The stem cell techniques are very useful for growing beef. We take a few cells from a cow, muscle-specific stem cells that can only become muscle. There's very little that we have to do to make these cells do the right thing. They divide by themselves, and if we provide those anchor points, the future tendons, they will self-organize into muscle. So a few cells that we take from this cow can turn into 10 tons of meat.
Grown by Professor Mark Post, meat in the laboratory was publicly cooked and tasted by the leading Austrian food industry expert Hanni Rutzner. According to its taste characteristics, it is not different from the beef of the traditional animal husbandry. The only difference is that no animals were killed to create this laboratory sample.
The more a country develops, the more meat its inhabitants consume. How can growing worldwide demand be satisfied without recourse to concentration camp-style cattle farms? Faster and faster, like the life cycle of livestock which may never see a meadow. Manufacturing meat faster than the animal has become a daily routine. In these vast food lots trampled by millions of cattle, not a blade of grass grows. A fleet of trucks from every corner of the country brings in tons of grain, soy meal, and protein-rich granules that will become tons of meat. The result is that it takes 100 liters of water to produce 1 kilogram of potatoes, 4,000 liters for 1 kilo of rice, and 13,000 liters for 1 kilo of beef, not to mention the oil guzzled in the production process and transport.
Our global rainforests are essentially the planet's lungs. They breathe in CO2 and exhale oxygen. An acre of rainforest is cleared every second, and the leading cause is to graze animals and grow their feed crops. That is essentially an entire football field cleared every single second. And it is estimated that every day, close to 100 plant, animal, and insect species are lost due to rainforest destruction.
This list of technologies will constantly grow with the increase in the number of participants. After all, as I said earlier, every person on the planet is a genius, unique in something, and sees the world in his or her own way. To most of the questions, we have already found the answers, but they are simply hidden and are the property of centralized systems. Project ENEBRA is no different from the projects created within the system. Anyone can at any time offer his own version of percentage distribution of shares, optimization of the applications code, terms and rules of tenders, more convenient interface, using of higher speed data transfer protocols to become a co-author of the project, if his idea will be confirmed by tests and supported by the majority of network participants. You should refer to Project ENEBRA not as a dogma, but as an idea with a ready-made prototype. Both can and should be improved by you because you doubtless know some understandable for you aspects better than me, the aspects of which are a part of your life. This project is specifically designed so flexible that it allows us to change any part of it up to the concept and title to avoid further stratification of society, to not provoke creation of similar projects, because the Earth is only one, and we only agree among each other and together to build the prosperity that we dream about. In our time, there is no ideal protection, which allows 100% to protect the system from hacking or penetration. Special services, intelligence services of various states do hackings in the internet or on a local network. The services consist of ordinary people who have received special training or so-called cybercriminals, or simply to say hackers. If you remove the mask from such a person, you will not see a terrible villain with an axe or a pistol. Under this mask is the face of an intellectually developed and intelligent person. He spent a lot of time on self-study and self-improvement. He thoroughly studied various network protocols and technologies, learned the programming languages, functioning of modern devices and communication. There is Anonymous, a movement in the world that is against harassment and surveillance in the internet. Thanks to the diligence and intelligence of these people, the internet is still a place of free communication between millions of ordinary people, and exactly because of that, you can watch this presentation now. In the ENEBRA system, there is a real motivation for such people, a lot of options for development and use of their potential. After all, if a person has discovered a systemic vulnerability that was not noticed by its creator, then this person, in fact, did a good. Thus, any person who identified a vulnerability of the project or individual applications of the system automatically becomes its co-author and begins to receive his percentage of benefits until this system is used and it is relevant. In such a way, another goal of Project ENEBRA is solved: to make allies from today's cybercriminals and to motivate them to work to improve the quality of information protection. I would like to draw your attention to the voting system in the ENEBRA system. It radically differs from the usual voting in our understanding. In the ENEBRA system, people will initially describe the parameters and hierarchy of criteria for evaluating any innovation. Each member of the system can offer his or her criterion and method of the evaluation of this or that methodology, device, law, technology, etc. Thus, based on the results of the tests, the system will automatically analyze the quality of innovation, and the decision will be made taking into account all existing evaluation criteria. If a person is incompetent in some matters, he or she cannot describe the evaluation criteria and create appropriate physical tests for them. For this reason, at each stage of voting, clear decisions based on real tests and calculations will be taken. This very approach will allow people with different cultures, traditions, educational level, and religious beliefs to work out the right approach to making joint decisions. The selection criterion will be based on specific scores and test scores, rather than fiery empty speech, colorful advertising, and pressure of authority. This method allows the achievement of the following project goal: to give people a new decision-making tool, voting, based on accurate calculations, tests, and the hierarchy of evaluation criteria, rather than on intuition, emotional state, influence of authority or propaganda, ethnic, racial, religious, or social belonging. Lawmaking is a very important and interesting part of the ENEBRA project that has enormous potential and allows to solve almost all contradictions which exist in the current legal systems. After registration in the system ENEBRA, a person automatically regains the status of a citizen of the earth that was gifted by nature at the time of his birth. The status of a citizen of the earth is fixed in the basic law in the system ENEBRA, the Constitution of the Earth. This is the list of absolutely understandable rules, which do not cause contradictions among all people on Earth and inseparably linked with the laws of nature. The Constitution is based on the revised articles from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. All articles of the Constitution can be changed at any time, reworked, improved, added or deleted by any member of the Project ENEBRA, if these modifications are justified and accepted by the majority of participants in the system by open voting. In essence, the ENEBRA project is the state system of the planet Earth, where the right of management is given to each of its citizens on absolutely equal terms. Any member of the system can at any time initiate any bill aimed at improving the quality of life of any living organism in the ecosystem of the Earth, with mandatory consideration of the positive consequences for future generations and not in conflict with the articles of the Constitution. After the publication of the bill, it is entered in the blockchain with a lifelong saving of the copyright of its creator and becomes available to the completion of all network participants. After completion of the revision period, it is put to a general vote. If accepted by the majority of participants in the system, it acquires the status of law, and the author and the finalizers of this law begin to receive their part of the reward in the form of 50% of the goods created by them or receive a previously approved reward. For better understanding, let's consider a specific example. Nowadays, a lot of people working on the internet are switching to using the Tor browser, although it is very slow, and they use the search engine DuckDuckGo, which leaves no search trails but has very limited possibilities. To hide their personal data from the ubiquitous US National Security Agency, NSA, and intelligence agencies of other countries, which grossly violate the rights and freedoms specified in Article 12 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, at one time signed by the governments of these countries. It turns out that governments spend billions of dollars of taxpayers' money on something that the taxpayers try to hide themselves from. It's a completely destructive process. If the ENEBRA system adopts a law prohibiting such activities, and it will be supported by most people in their countries who pay taxes daily for the support of such organizations, then without any kind of opposition and protests, governments will have to stop the activities of these structures. This in turn will free a huge scientific resource, which is now engaged in destructive processes, and will direct it to improve the quality of life of all people on the earth. The possibility of lawmaking in the ENEBRA project allows officials of any rank not to spend valuable time of their lives and huge financial resources to hold public events, useless debates, explanatory work, writing of pre-election programs, holding of opposition actions. The project gives them the opportunity to avoid political clashes and nervous stresses. Execution of punishment for wrongfully adopted decisions or corruption allows directing all your potential to create what they seek, i.e., the creation of laws that improve the quality of life of ordinary people. In addition, they will immediately be able to assess their work, since if the laws they have written will really improve the quality of life, people will gladly accept them by open voting, which I've already talked about in detail. As a result, all their brilliant legislative work will be permanently placed in the blockade, along with their biometric data, and will allow them to earn a lifetime fee for an important contribution to the prosperity of mankind. Also, the system allows a lot to increase the efficiency of the current presidents. Since they are basically guarantors of the Constitution, they have to watch on compliance with the adopted laws that they should not violate the constitutional rights of the citizens. In the ENEBRA system, 7 billion people will watch on it instead of 200 presidents. Because of that, the possibility of adopting an unconstitutional law is practically impossible. Any member of the system will be able to draw people's attention in the form of an innovation created by him, if he sees violations in the system of legislation, and if during the voting people really consider this a violation, a law or other normative act will be stopped, and the person who noticed the violation will be rewarded with resource equivalents from the Fund of Financing of World Projects in a predetermined amount accepted by the community. The system makes revolutions, protests, and strikes completely unnecessary. Because if you have an idea, just describe it and explain all its advantages. Perhaps people will be able to diversify and improve it. And you will not lose your time, but improve the world in which we live and where our descendants will gratefully live. In addition to human and scientific resources, the destructive waste of natural resources will be stopped. In the transitional period, in case of a refusal to adopt laws by governments coming from the majority of citizens of this country, will appear a fair question. Whose interests are protected by such governments? And even in this case, protests and revolutions are not necessary. After all, in the vast majority of countries in the world, there are democratic elections now, and in this election, people will be elected not from the list proposed by the government, but citizens of this country who proved in practice, not by words, their competence by creating real bills in the ENEBRA system, which will be supported not only by citizens of this country, but by people from the whole world. If necessary, a temporary ENEBRA party can be created. Participants in this party in different countries will become only those citizens of these countries who participate in writing real laws that improve the quality of life of people and the planet on the whole, and these laws were approved by the majority of the network participants. The main purpose of this temporary party will be the implementation of a single legislation approved by the majority of the participants of the ENEBRA system in all countries of the world. The need for the party will disappear, and it will self-destruct after the overwhelming majority of countries adopt these laws. Lawmaking in the ENEBRA system is the resource with huge opportunities. When using it, you can stop the barbarous destruction of natural resources, the extermination of animals and pollution of nature. Together with the use of resource equivalent, it is possible to stop bloodshed and wars. After all, the source of any war is the thirst for the benefits of a very small number of people. Wars exist only as long as on the grief of other people they are able to bring the coveted money. Let us think about how a modern war or terrorism can exist without billions of dollars paid for the production of weapons and ammunition, without highly paid contractors, without millions of tons of expensive fuels and lubricants. To resolve religious contradictions, because all religions say that in each of us there is a part of the Creator. If we follow the logic, we just need to unite, thereby gathering all these pieces together in order to get what the believing people call God, and the essence of this does not change the name that different religions came up with for him. To stop production and maintenance of weapons of mass destruction. We rarely think that by our tacit consent, we have given 9 people on our planet the right to decide whether we and our children will live or not. At any moment, one of these respected people can click on the available nuclear button and our planet will turn into a lifeless body. At one moment, everything will be destroyed, over which nature has worked more than 4.5 billion years. Look at these faces. Many of you do not even know their names, and we do not know what they are thinking about and what they plan, what is happening in their families, and what psychological state they are in at the moment. Civil aviation pilots pass a mandatory examination of a doctor before each flight, and if the flight is delayed for more than 6 hours, they pass it again. But despite these tough international rules and the personal responsibility of the doctor who signed the inspection, the world knows 100% of the suicide of pilots who killed themselves and passengers. I did try a lot, but I could not find any medical opinion on any current president. And even if we assume that these people are mentally very stable, and the completely illogical, colourful scenes of Hollywood films, from which we know thoroughly about the mechanism for launching nuclear missiles, complicated passwords, and the need for several people to launch this mechanism, are a bit like reality. One should not forget about the possibility of an absurd program or technical failure, the probability of which always exists. Think about what percentage of humanity needs such weapons, and most importantly, think how much it is necessary for you and your children. I am sure that more than half of humanity and all living organisms on the planet without exception do not need it. Therefore, after the constitution of the planet Earth is proclaimed, we will be able to get rid of this useless and terrible danger forever. to open a huge amount of information which today is classified as secret for every person on our planet. To make the right decision, a person needs the maximum amount of accurate information. But unfortunately, in modern management system, there are such concepts as state secrets. I had to use the data of the US Central Intelligence Agency in order to show you the amount and consumption of oil on the planet. But I could not estimate how much they are accurate and from what sources they were obtained, because in the overwhelming majority of countries, the information about available resources is a state secret and is closed to ordinary people. We cannot directly receive data from near-Earth orbit, despite the satellites working there are created by our taxes and our hands. The numbers of daily generated money are hidden from us, although we exchange our labor for them. Our politicians do closed meetings, where they make hidden decisions with an allegedly noble purpose in the name of national security. We even vote hiding our data that allows them to easily falsify the results of elections, although themselves they vote quite openly. One of the first and most important laws in the ENEBRA system will be the discovery of all the secret data, so that we will be able to adequately make the most informed decisions for the benefit of all mankind. Using the possibilities of the law-making system allows us to achieve the following project objectives: to give the opportunity for any person on Earth to participate in the process of lawmaking at the state level as well as globally. It will be possible to free thousands of scientists working today on destructive projects, intelligence, defense industry, etc., and to motivate all this potential to improve the quality of life on the whole Earth. To change the existing worldview in which an imposed reality governs a person and enable any person to control his or her reality. It is absolutely unnecessary to hold strikes, protests, demonstrations, and revolutions, because in fact, this is the loss of the most precious thing that a person has, which is the time of his life. To give unlimited access to any information that is carefully concealed by the ruling clans, the phenomenon of UFOs, developments in the field of free energy, etc. To stop bloodshed and military conflicts, to give an opportunity to jointly abolish the production of any weapons on the earth. To eliminate racial, religious, national, and social superiority on the basis of which, through political technologies, whole nations are today engaged in confrontation. To stop the barbaric destruction of flora and fauna all over the world. The ENEBRA system allows each person, regardless of age and location, to engage in any kind of activity that a person has chosen for him or herself. All the directions of activity exist in human society are always open to him or her. But, as was previously described, each of us is individual and brilliant in one or several directions. For this reason, a person who loves and understands agriculture, it may be difficult and therefore inefficient to understand the device of a satellite phone, but a creative person who can create a magnificent design will find it difficult to describe in legal language any article or rule of law. No matter how harmoniously and comprehensively developed a person's personality, it is quite difficult to deeply penetrate and embrace all development processes of the technological and human development of our society. In the existing management system, you delegate the right to adopt and ratify sectoral decisions to the existing government regardless of your desire and knowledge that fundamentally wrong, because limited number of government members physically cannot be professionals in all areas of life and the activity of human society. In addition, a professional is a person who daily works and practically develops himself in a certain domain, and governments, mostly resort to a peer review of researchers who work in different institutions and have only theoretical knowledge, which not always corresponds to practical needs. For this reason, many sectoral decisions and laws do not correspond to the real needs of these industries, contain a lot of contradictions, and thereby inhibit their development. A mechanism was created in the ENEBRA system that allows each person to delegate the right to make industry decisions to people whom this person considers as professionals, and to leave those branches for self-decision-making where the person is an expert himself. The data about the delegation of the right to make a decision are entered into the unit that is being created at that moment. When the delegate makes decisions in his field, then his decision automatically goes to ratification to the person who gave him the right to make decisions. Only after ratification, the decision gets the status of voted, and the delegate raises his rating at the same time. The higher the rating, the greater the impact a person receives at decision-making in his professional branch. To my opinion, this principle gives freedom of creativity to the person delegating his vote as well as to the delegate who receives a vote of confidence. At the same time, there is still the mutual responsibility of both to each other and to the rest of the members of the system for each concrete decision. At any time, each member of the system has the right to withdraw his delegated voice or to start making independent decisions in this branch, or to delegate it to another member, whose opinion is more in line with the opinion of the delegating person, and, as it was said above, is responsible for the making, ratification, of each decision. Thus, the making of industrial decisions will be made professionally and maximally contribute to the development of the industries themselves, and older people will be able to delegate their rights to their children and grandchildren, the persons to whom they trust, but not governments for which they did not even vote sometimes. Justice is one of the oldest elements of the current management system. It is based on legislation lobbied by the dominant clans and people with power. Each judge has the opportunity to use his official position, gaps and contradictions that exist in the legislation of any country. Consequently, it makes the opportunity of corruption, bribery, and a pressure on judges by the ruling structures. Moreover, the process of justice sometimes is delayed for years, sometimes carrying huge losses of funds and time with itself. Corruption is an abuse of power. There are such roots of corruption as selectivity of legislation, inequality of citizens before the law, legalized privileges and status for individuals. Corruption is possible only with a centralized control system. In the Middle Ages, there was the right of the first night, when a feudal lord was entitled to the first night with the bride of a peasant. If a peasant had a similar right to the bride of a feudal lord, such a right, a priori, would never have been accepted. In the modern world, due to anti-terrorist legislation, special services of various states have a legal right of access to the study of personal correspondence and wiretapping of ordinary citizens. If the law were not selective, ordinary citizens would have the same legal access to personal correspondence and telephone conversations of employees of special services, presidents, and government officials. But in this case, such legislation would not have been adopted by any government. The root of this problem was deleted in the ENEBRA system, because each person on equal rights has the right of legislative, executive, and judicial power. In this regard, the legislation itself will be minimized to clearly understandable rules of life and responsibility for their violation equal for any person. Property claims are impossible because there is no common property. All available property will be acquired on the basis of a smart contract with a specific person who will be the absolute owner of this property. the crime rate will be much lower than today in the most prosperous countries like Norway, Iceland, or Denmark, because most of crimes are done by people staying on the lowest level of the Maslow pyramid, when a very poor person is forced to choose between physical survival and crime. And all moral principles lose their priority when it is the question of life and death. The percentage of crimes committed by people with prosperity will also decrease in many times, because in the modern world, they occur through an understanding of impunity and 100% of the opportunity to justify themselves through relationships and money. Unintentional crimes will also be reduced to minimum due to rapid technical progress, and financial crimes or claims about non-payment of elements in the ENEBRA system are simply impossible, since children from the first moment of their lives begin to receive their resource equivalents. I've already talked in detail about this earlier. The remaining lawsuits will be considered according to the following scheme. The plaintiff creates an action statement on the approved model and describes his or her terms of settlement with the respondent, in case of acceptance of which the claim will be satisfied, and also makes payment for the possible work of the judges. This application is entered in the block created at that moment. After the block is saved in the blockchain, the statement of claim and the settlement agreement will be provided to the respondent for examination. In case of acceptance of the initial or jointly amended settlement agreement, the claim is considered satisfied and gets the status completed, and the preliminary payment of the claim will be returned to the plaintiff. If within the time allotted for the agreement the parties failed to reach agreement, the respondent can attach his explanations to the suit with a solution variant that would satisfy him or her. The system will assign the number of judges approved in advance by the network participants on the basis of random generation, and each of them will receive a complete set of documents on this claim without specifying the personal data on both sides of the process and the list of appointed judges. Each judge will be able to write in a special form his or her questions he or she is interested in, the answers to which he or she needs to make a correct verdict. After all appointed judges have taken their decisions, or the deadline for the consideration of the case is over, the list of judges becomes open and all parties to the process will be able to familiarize themselves with the decision taken by each other. Based on the results of the adopted decisions, the system will automatically identify the winner, and judges for their work will receive equal shares of resource equivalents previously paid by the plaintiff. If the plaintiff wins, the amount spent on court will automatically be charged to the defendant from the share of the person. I have shown you only one of the possible variants of conducting trials, and I am sure that in the future this process will be simplified and finalized by professionals in this field. In addition, if you carefully consider any correctly written law, you can see that this document logically describes a certain sequence of actions when specific conditions come. And if this is wholesome logic, then it can be fixed in the program code. Those who manage to create such applications will be able to increase the speed of decision-making by many times and reduce the cost of litigation. This will make it possible to remove the human factor from the justice system as much as possible, replacing it with a completely impartial and incorruptible program code, and the authors of this application receive a lifetime fee for their invaluable work. Thus, another objective of the project is solved: to move to a new level of justice, completely removing the opportunities for corruption, human error, and external pressure. Today, one of the main forms of public opinion is the mass media, mainly television. These are centralized systems that are supported by the money of elite groups and power structures, mainly engaged in intimidation and disinformation of the population in the interests of their owners. Since their main objective is to preserve the achieved positions, they need to constantly demonstrate their importance and the extreme need for the life of society. It is thanks to their efforts and the media under their control that now every person of Arab appearance is perceived as a terrorist. According to statistics, our children manage to absorb up to 4,000 hours of useless advertising before going to first-grade classes. From the TV screens, there is propaganda of violence and drugs, which forms the consciousness of our children and justifies the increase in the number of law enforcement agencies whose main task is to protect those in power from all others. And the endless advertising of harmful food products and the medicine of the pharmaceutical companies only aggravates a lot of diseases of mankind. In the ENEBRA system, all opportunities for realization and development of their creative potential by any participant are presented. Anyone can write an article, take a picture of his or her story, comment on it and save it in a special format, thereby securing his or her copyright, and guaranteeing the honesty of this information, not by the name of the broadcasting channel, but by their biometric data. A completely different person can collect all these videos into a single unit and become a co-author of the people who created them. Other people can become co-authors, translating this information into other languages and making it accessible for understanding of people who live in other parts of our planet. The more people review and confirm these materials, the higher will be the rating of the news, and consequently, for each scan, the ENEBRA system will redistribute part of the generated ENEBRAs to the resource of the authors of the news or articles. All the data will remain forever in the chain of data blockchain, thereby permanently retaining a clear sequence of events for the succeeding generations, excluding in the future the possibility of changing history and distorting historical facts. Thus, one more objective of the project is solved: to make it impossible to change historical facts and history itself. By the authorities, this process is now being used to strip entire nations. In the process of life, almost everyone has to go to medical institutions. The life of most people on the planet begins in the presence of a doctor, and the doctor states death when life is over. In our time, the physician's income does not depend on the quality of the treatment. It is directly proportional to the number of people applying to him, the number of prescribed medicines, and the number of paid procedures strictly controlled by centralized systems. In the film Prosperity, the reasons and all the perniciousness of the situation in the healthcare system were revealed.
Like education, health is yet another area dominated by big money and corporations. The American Medical Association, for example, is largely funded by the Rockefellers, who use their funding to influence AMA research and decision-making.
The average MD in 4 years of medical school takes one course in nutrition, 2.5 hours in many cases, and the materials used, the curriculum materials, are supplied by the National Dairy Council and the National Livestock and Meat Board and other industries, including the Sugar Association, with products to sell that actually undermine our health in the first place.
Unfortunately, the way the system of medicine is set up, medical education is primarily funded by pharmaceutical companies. So there's a motive to make and sell as many drugs as possible. It's also a very time-effective way of making money for the physician, for the pharmaceutical company, for the whole medical establishment. But it's really perpetuating the problems it was meant to alleviate.
Side effects may include nausea, dry mouth, and constipation.
Decreases in white blood cells, which can be serious.
Sexual side effects, diarrhea, nausea, and sleepiness.
Can lead to coma or death.
In my opinion, in the overwhelming majority of cases, the disease is a normal reaction of the body to an incorrect lifestyle, which is associated with improper diet, nervous stress, unsanitary conditions of life, forced slave labor, and deteriorating environmental conditions. In the ENEBRA system, any person can get the status of a doctor regardless of his or her education and titles. he or she has to follow the following conditions. If they openly publish their own treatment methodology, thereby fixing the copyright, or refer to the technique already described by other doctors or scientists of the ENEBRA system, or completes the existing methodology, becoming the co-author of its rights holder, a certain number of participants of the system must confirm with their biometric data that they were cured by this person. The system will indicate the place and time of admission of patients. This mechanism puts completely in equal conditions the doctor of traditional and non-traditional medicine. From the moment of registration in the ENEBRA system, each participant of the system receives a medical card assigned for his or her biometric data, which is accessible to the person himself and any member of the system who is in the immediate vicinity of that person. For all other participants in the system, it is not available. When you visit a doctor, the time and date of the visit are automatically displayed in the card, as well as the data of the doctor who opened this card, as any fact of the doctor's card opening is permanently preserved in the new unit being created at that moment. And such data as diagnosis, prescribed medications and procedures, examination materials, X-ray, cardiogram of the heart, description of the tests, etc., are recorded by the doctor who conducted the examination. This card also includes information about all substances and medications that cause allergic reactions or rejected by the patient's body, and those that are transferred normally. All these data are certified by the biometric data of the doctor himself and permanently stored in the blockchain system. The system provides confidentiality of a person's personal data, and in the case when the doctor, without the need and without the permission of the person himself, will publicize the patient's personal medical data, the community decision may deprive him of the status of a doctor. With this system, wherever a person is at the time of an emergency, when time is a decisive factor, anyone in the immediate vicinity of a doctor may receive instant access to a medical history of the person, even if the patient is currently in an unconscious or shocked state, since only a biometric parameter is required for this. And if the member of the system was registered by the obstetrician and his parents at the time of the birth, the medical card will contain all the medical information from the moment of his birth. It is invaluable information for the doctor, with which he will be able to make the most correct decision quickly. As I said before, by its essence, the ENEBRA system is an extensive database, copies of which are distributed on all computers that are part of this decentralized network. This database allows in real time to obtain accurate statistics on the number of cases of a certain disease, the effectiveness of one or another method of treatment of this disease, to determine the rating of the doctor on the number of successful and unsuccessful outcomes of treatment. If, after the treatment, in the future the patient will not address other doctors with the same diagnosis, this means that not only the illness itself has been cured, but also the cause which has led to its arousal has been eliminated. The openness of treatment methods allows us solving the following goal of the project. Once and forever to mark a decisive end to the projects on eugenics and sterilization. And the capacities of the database system will allow people receiving accurate statistics on the effectiveness of treatment methods for various diseases, both traditional and non-traditional medicines. Sharing databases and biometric technologies allows solving the following project objective: to provide instant access for any doctor for a complete history of a patient's illness, even if the patient is in an unconscious or shocked state. The system of rewarding the author of the methodology or its co-author is no different from those described earlier. The greater the percentage of those who seek help from participants of the system will benefit from the work of this method, the more resources the system will redistribute to these specific people. At one time, Henry Ford successfully applied the method of remuneration of people who were responsible for the working capacity of the car conveyor. For these people, the salary was accrued only for the time they spent in the relax room, and as soon as they left there for the repair of the conveyor, the payment was stopped. Thus, the longer the production line operated without failures, the higher their wages were. It was the most powerful motivation for those people to constantly improve the conveyor and create a set of scheduled work that did not allow it to break. In the ENEBRA system, this principle is laid down in the payment of the work of doctors and people who wish to self-fulfillment in the field of law and order protection, since in the system it is the right and responsibility of every citizen. The rewards for these people by community decision can be made from the share of financing the world projects and will increase proportionally in the event of a reduction in the number of cases of the disease or the number of offences. Thus, the main task of doctors will not be treatment of people, but the creation of methods and complexes of measures aimed at the stability of the human body to various diseases. The system will not only save a huge number of human lives in emergency situations, it will allow a huge number of professionals to jointly and effectively deal with any disease, having uncontested data on diverse statistics. And it will also save a huge amount of natural resources. Because only one letterhead used in medical institutions in the volume of the whole Earth is cut down all day by day, tons of fuel are transported for its transportation and a huge amount of energy for its processing. With the appearance of GPS and GSM technology, we can easily determine our location. Due to these technologies, virtually every country in the world has a convenient mobile application that allows you to call a taxi. The principle of this free application is very simple. You need to install it on your phone and, if necessary, call a taxi, click on the order button. The system will automatically determine your location and notify all the closest taxis connected to the system of this application. In the ENEBRA system, each participant will have exactly the same application installed, only a little bit with the other functional. If a person is in trouble or has witnessed any offence, he will only need to click on the help button, and all people in a radius of quick access from him will immediately receive a request for assistance, the exact place of the incident, and the data of the person calling. In the overwhelming majority of cases, any offence instantly stops in the presence of witnesses. Thus, without any need of existing law enforcement agencies, any offence will be stopped. If you need to find a lost person, you only need to upload a photo and hundreds of people in the possible range of search will simultaneously look around and report on his or her location. It is much more efficient than the existing system. If a person calls several times without need, then the application will lower their rating, and in the future it can be completely blocked by the system. The system is much more effective than the one that exists, since accidentally within the radius of a call, people will be able to get to the scene much faster, thereby preventing the offence and providing more effective assistance to the victim than the existing law enforcement agencies, which in most cases arrive when the need for them to be present is already absent. In addition, the application will unite people and give the awareness of their necessity in the life of society. Many famous scientists of modern science believe that overpopulation is the main threat to humanity. All my attempts to find at least some mathematical rationale and realistic calculations of the ratio of the resources of the planet to the number of people have not succeeded. In order to imagine the scope of the tragedy, I took advantage of the calculator and imagined that all the inhabitants of the Earth gathered for the largest party. If each of us were allocated 1 square meter, then for carrying out such an action, 7.3 billion square meters will be needed. That is 7,300 kilometers squared. As a result, the entire population of the planet Earth can safely settle on the island of Cyprus, and there will still be room for buffet tables, since the island area is 9,251 kilometers squared. I do not consider overpopulation a problem. That is, the gift, which was awarded to us by nature, and instead of thinking how to reduce the population of the Earth using genetically modified corn, projects on eugenics and sterilization, war and drugs, one must think how to master new technologies and other planets. There are vast galaxies with enormous resources around us, and the more of us, the faster we find answers to the questions we are interested in, the more great discoveries await us, and the more opportunities open for us. We just need to combine our knowledge and efforts in this direction. If everyone is given free access to knowledge and technology, the opportunity to engage in a favorite business, travel around the world, participate in interesting projects and fully develop, then I'm sure that over time we will think how to encourage people to reproduce ourselves like this, as it is now happening in developed countries of the world.
Again, it was the Rockefellers who created the National Education Association with help from the Carnegie Foundation and later from the Ford Foundation. What the captains of industry wanted from our schools was an obedient and docile workforce who would be manageable employees and eager consumers.
Schools are to establish fixed habits of response to authority. That's why it takes 12 years. You're to respond reflexively when anyone in a position of authority tells you what to do.
I do not want to go into more details about those depressing facts that are magnificently revealed in the above-mentioned films, which openly show the goals and the state of our education system, which is intended to grow us into an obedient and controllable herd, confidently moving in a constructed tunnel of thousands of stereotypes and rules, without the right to even doubt in their truth. There are thousands of progressive techniques in the world that can help people develop in a diverse way and find their own unique path, where his or her talent and potential will be revealed to the maximum. One of these techniques was developed almost 100 years ago by the Austrian philosopher Rudolf Steiner. On its basis, Waldorf schools were created, the principle of which is based on the fact that it does not prevent the child from revealing his potential independently. But these schools were not able to get a leading position in the existing state and private education, since the management of the system does not need creative and developed people, because it is much easier to manage the backward and ignorant people. And the very purpose of teaching in the modern system is to study to get the desired money, not the joy of creativity. Think about the fact that the most demanded in the modern world is legal science, allowing you to make money on the problems and suffering of people, as well as economic, allowing to create money from the air. It is disgusting to realize that decades of the most active and valuable period of life given to obtaining knowledge in public or private educational institutions did not bring 5% of the knowledge that we use and receive daily in life, independently collecting it from a variety of hidden sources and experience of real life. In the ENEBRA system, all these progressive techniques will be in demand, since the system of values itself will change. All the latest technologies, techniques, scientific discoveries, data from all corners of the Earth and space will be in the open and free to access. We will only have to show our children the full spectrum of opportunities open to them and teach the methods of obtaining the information they need as easily as possible, and then simply do not interfere with their development, whose goal is not the slave labor in the name of money, but the improvement of the quality of life of people and the disclosure of their own potential. Currently, there are tens of thousands of charitable human rights environmental organizations and foundations. Thanks to these organizations, at one time the nuclear weapons tests were stopped, the industrial shooting of whales reduced, and cutting thousands of hectares of forest massifs were saved. It is precisely because of this daily struggle with governments and corporations whose interests and governments are represented, on our planet there are still reserves, national parks, remains of life in the ocean, and a small number of areas of freedom of speech, to which the internet can still be considered. But now these organizations have lost their relevance. I will show the main reasons that prevent these organizations from uniting their efforts, because it is much easier to achieve what they declare and to what end they seek, and their goals are very similar. There are several reasons for this. The first reason is financial interest. All these organizations have their own personal pocket in the form of donations, and they do not want to share with each other. I could not find any open financial report about the funds received and spent by them. The second reason is leadership. The overwhelming majority of these organizations and funds, as well as the existing system, are created on the centralized principle, and their leaders consider their opinions to be the only correct one. The third reason is that the activities of all these organizations are strictly regulated by the current legislation and the power of those who own them. This fact is comprehensively disclosed in the movie of Kip Anderson, Cowspiracy. On the one hand, people daily pay taxes in their own countries to hold governments, and on the other hand, they spend their time and make donation for environmental protection measures and protest actions directed against the activities of the same governments. This is at least unreasonable. In the ENEBRA system, any person, instead of losing money and time at the next demonstration, can take part in the creation of the draft constitution of the planet Earth or any other law. This does not require government approval. Just write and justify your norm, and if most people support you, this norm will become an integral part of the life of all people on the planet. Modern philanthropists finance only organizations and projects that do not contradict with the interests of governments and large corporations of which they are, in fact, representatives. Under the existing system, all discoveries and technologies that have emerged from donations are hidden from ordinary people, eventually becoming the property of commercial structures and are realized for money. I could not find any technology or method of treatment created for the money of these philanthropists which would be given openly and free of charge among people. Therefore, their actions can hardly be called charity. For example, Bill Gates invests billions of dollars in the fight against malaria. In 1948, the emerging state of Israel, for some years in some strange way, got rid of this disease. Perhaps the philanthropist is more closely acquainted with the experience of this small but very reasonable country. Bill also sacrifices enormous funds for the teaching and training of teachers for the education system, the real goals of which I have already talked about in detail. Instead of simply making these techniques and knowledge free and open in the internet, then everyone would be free to take advantage of this invaluable gift for free. I respect Bill Gates and other philanthropists. Nobody has the right to tell them what to spend their capital on. But I believe that ordinary commerce should not be called charity. In the ENEBRA system, all technologies and techniques are completely open and accessible to anyone on a completely free basis, and the copyright to them belongs to their real creators. There is a paradise button in the interface of the ENEBRA application itself. When it is pressed, the funds from the person enter into the part financing of world projects, where people jointly determine for what priority needs they are directed. For a person clicking on this button, this means that he or she is more than secure, completely self-fulfilling, and gives these resources so that those who have not yet realized their projects could achieve their goal and improve their quality of life by improving the lives of other people and living beings on our planet. When people, with the help of the system, begin to fully realize themselves, a new era of conscious development of humanity, prosperity will come on the earth.